Well, good afternoon, everyone. So first I want to welcome you all to Philadelphia, particularly if you've never been here before. Welcome to our birthplaces of our nation. We're proud of this city. I just want to take a few moments to talk about policing, particularly how it's changed in my 27-year career, and some of the challenges that we will face and continue to face in law enforcement. When I started in the police department in 1989, this term that you've heard multiple times called community policing was something that was not really embraced in policing. Back then, a lot of departments embraced the professional model, very militaristic, us versus them, we know what's best for you in your neighborhood, and we'll get it done for you, but we are the robots that are like soldiers, if you will, and we're going to do what we have to do. Well, that no longer is embraced by very many departments across the country now, largely because of the times that we live in, and they are indeed very challenging. Most departments, even though it may look different in every jurisdiction, really have started to embrace community policing. Now, the interesting thing is why it took so long, because the concept itself is centuries old. And a gentleman named Sir Robert Peel, who most of you probably are aware of, who was kind of the father of policing, actually said the following in a quote: "The police are the public, and the public are the police. The police being the only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence." This is in the 1800s. A man understanding the tenets of working with the people you're sworn to protect and serve, and why you can only get it done if you do it through them and alongside them. If you fast forward now, I started 27 years ago. A lot of things have changed significantly, and over the last 18 months, if you've been following things in the U.S., particularly related to police-community relations, you will know that there have been some significant challenges. There's actually a chasm that exists in many communities, particularly communities of color, in light of some of the things that have gone on. And in this era where we have social media, cameras that all have phones on them, everything that gets captured in real time, you have to know and acknowledge that there have been some things that have happened in this profession that have been nothing short of embarrassing. There have been some things that have been absolutely egregious that have been captured on someone's cell phone or some surveillance camera, that irrespective of how much you support the police and policing, and I love this profession with my heart and soul, that some of these things actually made your stomach turn. And so acknowledging that, on top of the fact that in this country in particular, and I'm sure it's no different around the world, we have now this 24-hour news cycle. Most of us in the room seem to be about my age, give or take, or older, and there was a time in this country when the news came on a couple times a day at most, and that was it. Now you have news cycles that are not only on 24 hours, but if you want a liberal news spin, then you look at this news station. If you want a conservative one, you look at this one. And when you're dealing with some of the things that I'm alluding to, and particularly some of the footage that have happened, or capturing some of the things that have happened, it's really a daunting task for police departments to deal with. So we now acknowledge that these controversies exist, and we have to work very hard to improve upon them. Add to all that the fact that at the same time, across this country in many big cities like Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, DC, and plenty of other places, we are now starting to see an uptick in gun violence, which is a significant issue across this nation, and trying to find a way to deal with this. Now, if you know anything about our statistics in this country in particular, coming out of the late 80s and early 90s, we had the crack epidemic where even in this city, we had about 500 murders. And cities like New York had over 2,000. This is on a street in the United States of America. And when you think about that, that is absolutely ridiculous. And while most departments have cut those numbers significantly, we are now getting concerned again because gun violence is so pervasive in our nation and trying to find a way to get our arms around it. We've had significant success because of the data that we use, the intelligence that we use, and just about every department in this nation is data-driven and intelligence-driven, much in large part thanks to the military as well as other entities that have helped us with that. But we still fight this epidemic called gun violence. On top of that, you have issues now where police officers are now getting killed in record numbers. There was just a statistic put out yesterday that indicated that as of April 1st of 2015, there had been 7 police officers shot and killed in this country. That same date, this year, there have been 16 already. Very alarming. The last one of which was a state trooper down in Virginia. Many of you may have heard about that. This issue is so complex. Trying to find a way to get our arms around it is significant. Policing has always been a dangerous occupation, much like the military. And we all recognize that and we all accept that. However, all these things make for a very difficult challenge for us, particularly with what I started with, the chasm that exists between communities, as well as the violence that they face and the violence that police officers face trying to protect and serve their respective jurisdictions. So trying to find a balance, strike a balance between police-community relations, tamping down violence, keeping your police officers safe, particularly as a police leader, are all very difficult to do. You may have heard that back in January, and unfortunately I had been sworn in all of 3 days, when Officer Jesse Hartnett was traveling in Southwest Philadelphia with a Midnight to 8 tour, and he was just cruising up the street, and a gentleman to his left, dressed in Muslim garb, immediately ran up on top of him, firing a number of 9mm rounds, until the point that the individual got his arm inside of Officer Hartnett's car and continued to fire at close range. Now, here are some interesting situations. Some of you may have seen this footage. This was an international incident. At the time, the only way that Officer Hartnett was able to protect himself was to shield himself, particularly his head, with his left arm as he leaned over into the passenger seat. All the while, the male is inside the car firing multiple rounds at him. This individual turns and runs, and miraculously, whether it's through his training, depending on what you believe in, or the grace of God, Officer Hartnett exited his vehicle, immediately started firing, and the interesting thing is his left arm is completely immobilized. He cannot move it, and he is left-handed. He somehow manages, and this is all captured on video, incidentally, he somehow manages to get his weapon out of his holster with his right arm, his right hand, fires, strikes the male, and responding officers are actually able to apprehend this guy. Now, what's also interesting, not only did he have the peace of mind to do that, being a left-handed officer firing with his right hand, he also was able to, with one hand, get on his police radio and notify the police dispatch what was going on. And when he returned to his vehicle, realizing that his fellow officers had already apprehended this individual, he also realized, and he announces it on radio, that he is bleeding profusely, and that he then tells another officer that he needs a tourniquet because he realizes he's experiencing significant blood loss. Well, thankfully, he survived, but he has undergone multiple surgeries, multiple. And the very next day is when this job takes the turn for us, because we find out in a videotape confession that the male in question said that he did it for the following reasons. That number one, he said that the police protect laws that are contrary to Islam. He then said that he did it in the name of the Islamic State. And so instantly you have this situation where you feel like your entire department is not only on edge, because whenever a police officer gets shot, obviously tensions raised, but now you're dealing with a circumstance that is not that common, where someone indicates that they did it for a particular purpose, and in this case it looks like terrorism. And so trying to figure out how do you balance that scale was something that's very difficult for us, all the while knowing that we have a significant Islamic community here that does wonderful things across the city, and in trying to ensure that you don't do anything to suggest in any way that you believe that anyone who is of the Islamic faith would have anything to do with this, but at the same time understanding that you have to say exactly what happened. Now, one of the interesting things that had to be done also that day, and it was very difficult for me to do, because as you imagine, once the media found out what the motive was, they were there in my headquarters in full force. And so there were probably as many camera and reporters as this entire side of the room. And so they're all over the place. And in addition to outlining this story, and you know it's before an international audience, I also have the misfortune of telling them that the individual who shot Jesse Hartnett did so with one of our own guns that was stolen. But it goes to the fact that you have to be forthright, you have to be honest with people, you have to demonstrate that you are being as transparent as possible, which is one of the things, and I'll start to pivot about some of the things that we're doing, not only with regard to connecting with community, but with regard to trying to make this entire city a safer place by working in partnership with the people called our community, because we believe that it is our community that is our greatest asset. And so we believe in leveraging those assets. I will not submit to you that we have reached that pinnacle where we've got perfection. We've got a long way to go. Certainly there are neighborhoods in Philadelphia who have that sentiment that the police department is an occupying force and that we are not there for them. And that is the significant challenge in trying to even make your police officers understand that it's never us against them, and that when you adopt that mentality, you will invariably create more problems than we already have. So one of the things that we started doing approximately 5 or 6 years ago under my predecessor, Commissioner Ramsey, is we send every recruit class to the Holocaust Museum. Because one, we want them to know about history in particular, but also to know that in the name of policing, sometimes police departments, police agencies have not always been on the right side of the law, and want them to know the impact of that, particularly on a nation and on a group of people. And so that is a part of our curriculum. Every class goes through this. They go through the Constitution Center, which is not far from here, so that they can kind of further understand that history and how it ties into us. Because if you don't understand those things, then you can become victim, or you can be actually guilty of some of those same things. But one of the things that we also do that is very actionable, we started this in about '09, and these are all things we try to do to connect communities, and as well as fight crime. Every police officer who is leaving our police academy since 2009 walks a foot beat for anywhere from a year or more. And they walk with a partner, and they get trained and all that stuff, so I don't want to bog you down with that. But we do it for two express purposes. Number one, we want you to understand that we've proven through our study with Temple University, which is a local university here, that it is actually one of the most effective crime-fighting tools we have, and it is logical for us because what happens is, in a big city, in a busy city like Philadelphia, your 911 or police dispatch will run your cars from one end of a district to another because the calls don't stop. We answer 3.7 million calls for service every year. And so we have 21 police districts, but even within that, there's so many calls for service of so many different natures that if you graduated from the academy and the only thing you did was get in a 4,000-pound vehicle and you run from call to call, you don't have the same impact necessarily as someone who's walking a 2x2, and we put them in the hottest spots imaginable. There's not feel-good beats, they're not business community beats, they're in hot spots, and we've been able to prove that by doing this, we've had 22% reductions in violent crime in areas where they walk. But the bigger piece of it is, we also want them to know that the communities that you serve, you will never serve them properly if you don't get to know who they are. And so when you are driving around in that 4,000-pound vehicle and you're chasing 911 calls, it does not afford you the opportunity to make that necessary connection where people may simply slip information or intel in your pocket that they wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to do. And I'll tell you, there's so many positive things in addition to the crime reduction that have happened. I witnessed one firsthand about 5 years ago. I was driving in Southwest Philadelphia one evening along with my aide, and we came upon two rookie officers. They didn't even see me, and they were talking to a young girl. And for whatever reason, I could see whatever this exchange was. It was a good exchange. The girl was only about 7 or 8, and she was captivated by them. And they don't see me pull up, even though at the time I was in a marked police car. And so I knew they were new because I don't know about the military, but these guys were spit and polished. They were slim. There's not a thing out of place, you know, no stomach, no this, no that, you know. And so I knew they were brand new. Everything was spit shined and everything. And not to say that we don't have veterans that do it, but just not as many. So I pulled alongside, and when I finally got the attention of one of the officers, he came over and he said, "Sir," I was still the first deputy at the time. I wasn't the police commissioner. And I said, "So what's going on?" I said, "You guys are talking to a young girl." And he says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I see the other officer at the time, he's got a smartphone in his hand. And then he said something that may sound trivial to you, but it absolutely made my day. He said, "Sir, we're helping her with her homework." They were on the internet, helping her with her homework. Now, while the average person driving by, like myself, might not have been able to discern exactly what was going on unless they spoke to that officer, I could also see prior to talking to him that it was something positive going on in that exchange. So for anybody watching, that was a positive thing. But also for that little girl, imagine for her, the impact that that probably had for her that is permanently on her mind. It's indelible now because she had, irrespective of what anyone says to her about the police, she has in her mind that, wait a minute, I remember these two police officers took their time to actually help me with my homework. That, to me, showed me not only were we doing the right crime-fighting strategy and community thing, but there were people out there in this uniform who got it and understood it. Many of you know about these body-worn cameras that are being worn in police departments across this nation. We are presently piloting that in one of our districts. We just ordered 300 additional cameras, and this is something we are going to go wholesale with across the city. We believe that will have a positive impact for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we have a policy that says that anyone can videotape the police department provided they do not interfere with police officers performing their duties. Police officers should in turn, though, have the opportunity to do that. And the ones that have piloted the program, we've had about 29 or so, have said that they found that it has lowered the temperature in many encounters because we have a wiretap kind of law where you have to announce anytime you're going to record someone audio. And they believe that doing that has helped people significantly. You know, they tell me of a story of one time they had a rather volatile encounter of a guy, and they really weren't doing anything but trying to get him from flailing around, and he saw a bunch of people around, and I guess he was going to do what everybody else, and police brutality, until they said, you know you're being videoed, right? Oh, okay. And then it went away. You know, it's like, so what? So at the end of the day, we believe these things actually will help us. We will continue to do this. This is significant. Reality-based training. Something we have to do. We acknowledge that we don't have it perfect with regard to how we respond to volatile incidents. And so we have to make sure that we put our police officers through training that is real and that they can respond. Because at the end of the day, we have this notion for so many years in policing that I have to go home safe. While that is true, you also have a responsibility to make sure that everyone goes home safe. Even the suspect. That to the degree that you can do so, you need to make sure that that happens too. Not that you put yourself in harm's way, but that you understand that this is a holistic approach and that you have to see the big picture in all of this. We push now over and over. Our police citywide band talks about tactics. Be careful, because a lot of times in our shootings, and I'm sure it's no different than across the nation, and I'm talking about our police-involved shootings, it's not necessarily whether the shooting itself was legal or illegal, or whether you could or couldn't. It's really about the tactics that led up to it and whether or not you put yourself in harm's way just before you fired your weapon. And did you do everything you needed to do to prevent yourself from being attacked? Particularly if someone has a knife, if you can put something in between you and that individual to buy time, then that's what we want you to do, because our duty is to preserve life irrespective of whose life it is. We also have crisis intervention, where we train people to deal with the mentally ill. And we deal with what we call them tasers, that's the company, but we know they're electronic control weapons. And we try to employ as many of these non-lethal weapons as possible, because here's the situation now. If something happens in California, in this country, that is viewed as controversial with policing, it is just like it happened here today. And that was not always the case. And so we have had demonstrations in Philadelphia that have been rather large in scale, that have dealt with issues that had nothing to do with an incident that happened in Philadelphia. And I'm quite certain the same thing holds true for other cities across this country. It is a major issue for police departments that are dealing with this now, finding a way to make sure that we get these things right, all the while making sure that your police officers don't feel like you're selling them down the river with your rhetoric, because that's where some of the rub comes and the balance comes, because you all know that whenever you're speaking, irrespective of what the audience looks like, you always speak in the more than one group, whether you think you are or not. The group may look homogeneous to you, but at the same token, they're not. So in the case of a police chief, for example, and I'm sure it's no different with the military, every time I do a press conference on an issue, I'm thinking about how does the community think about what I'm saying, what do they think, what do the police officers think, as well as what do community or elected officials think. There's so many groups that you have to balance, and these are what make things difficult. So as you think about Jesse Hartnett and the international implications of that shooting, as well as any other situation involving police and community, we have to be very intentional about how we connect with our various groups across the city. Philadelphia is one of the most diverse cities in the nation. We've got people of all ethnicities, religions, races, and what have you in this city. And so we are very intentional in the police department about how we go about establishing relationships with different groups. I'll give you an example. I actually still am the liaison for the clergy in the chaplain program, and it's an eclectic group. It's non-denominational. We have an individual, a deputy commissioner, who deals nothing with the Asian community, which is encompassing people from all parts of Asia. And we have a great relationship with them. And even within that, there are subsets of those groups where we are very, very intentional about making connections. Do we have it perfect? Not by any stretch of the imagination. But we know that if we do not get out there, roll up our sleeves, and show that we're willing to make whatever connections necessary, we will not get it done. We will not drive down crime like we want to. We will not close this gap between police and community relations or issues that are having. And we will not build the best city that we can, because we believe in policing that first it starts with having a safe city. And if you don't have that, then you don't have anything. Businesses won't come, schools will suffer, and we believe wholeheartedly and maybe a bit selfishly that we play a major role in how vibrant a city will be. And so for us, we believe that despite these challenges, there are things that we can do if we work together and we work to establish these relationships. It is up for the benefit of everyone concerned for us to do this, irrespective of the rhetoric you got out there, and there's some of it out there. Let me tell you, we, in an attempt to make connections like during this volatility, I've sat on a couple panels that were designed to talk about the problems in police-community relations, and some of them weren't so nice, I'm gonna be honest with you. And I kind of felt like it was me against the room. And I went to one where I get introduced first. And I'm thinking this is a good day, because this is a professional group. These are people who are educated, and I'll be honest with you, they're all African American, but I just kind of thought that, we'll have a professional dialogue and it won't be any problem. There were about 6 people on the panel. I'm the first one introduced. And when I go up on stage and take my seat to the far right, the next lady comes up and she says, as she points to me, "I'm not sitting next to that." Now, it went all downhill from there. as you might imagine. It was not good. It was literally my aide and my sergeant were seated in the audience, and they're texting me on my phone things like, boss, we're gonna have to shoot our way out of here, this is getting bad, to boss, you just lost your poker face, and all these other things. So when you deal with all these issues, trying to balance all these issues out, understanding that you're always talking to multiple audiences at one time, and that you're going to always find challenges, and that sometimes the media helps you, sometimes they don't. It makes for a very interesting time. But despite it all, we're going to keep pushing, we're going to keep working hard, we're going to work smart, and we're going to do what we need to do to make this city a safer place. So I'm going to end here and open it up for questions and say thank you for listening. All right? All the way in the back.
Thank you. I'm Colonel Kebe from Senegal. My question is pertaining to the relation, to the position of two presidential candidates pertaining to a better watch or surveillance to Muslim communities. In order to fight, against terrorism. My question is, don't you think, how do you foresee, or how does the implementation of such a decision if taken? And don't you think that such decision maybe will bring a divide between communities and also bring more radicalism with a normal Muslim? Because I think that is an important problem, and the police will have to deal with it, since it is question to make patrol in those communities. Thank you.
So, if I heard you correctly in the beginning, you made reference to our political system and what's been going on. So that's one, and that some of that rhetoric, particularly coming out of one part of our, and I won't get into too much of the politics because you heard it, will make it undoubtedly very difficult for us, because we're on the ground. We are. In fact, let me say something to your point. You may have heard the particular candidate made reference to that there should be identifiers in New York City about which communities are Muslim, and fortunately the police chief, Bratton, fired back rather vehemently to that. And so are all the police chiefs in the country. They take issue with that, because first of all, we don't go around identifying neighborhoods as a Muslim neighborhood and it should be identified this way. For us, we have to work very hard not to fall victim to that type of thinking, because we are most likely to deal with the fallout from any rhetoric like that you'll deal with nationally, and so it makes us cringe. And so I was happy that my colleague up in New York did what he did, as well as his mayor, because it set the tone that we don't ever want you to think, any of our communities, that we are complicit in that kind of logic, because we are not. Because we need everybody, and we got people all across our city, which is significantly smaller than New York. We have 1.5 million people, they have 8 million. But we have a city that's just as diverse, and we need everyone to make it a more vibrant city. So you're right. We need to make sure we stay as far away from that type of stuff as we possibly can. And thankfully, there's not, I know not any major city police departments that really want to, they want to make sure that we do not do anything that looks like we are complicit in that. And that's the bottom line. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry, sir, which one?
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you pick them? That's why I don't get in trouble.
Thank you. My name is Sarah. I come from Slovenia. Commissioner, of course, I know that you are policemen, that you are not politicians. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to make a comment, to answer the question. But nevertheless, in your address, you mentioned that the gun violence is on the rise again. So my question would be, why now? Why in such places like Chicago and Washington, D.C.? Thank you.
So that's an interesting question, and you know, I'm sure it's not much different in your respective country, or it might be in some, but not most certainly not here, and it's certainly no different with the military, with the press. They may take whatever spin they want, and academia may do the same thing. If you listen to the academics, they'll tell you that, number one, comparing crime from one year to another is always dangerous because it's too small of a time frame to really get an accurate measure. And that's some merit to that. I think the danger sometimes is we can fall victim even in policing of maybe sometimes taking too much credit for crime reduction. I believe we make a significant difference, particularly as it relates to retaliatory crime. But the reality of it is, I don't have a crystal ball. If you choose to shoot the general, I don't know that. But if I know all the general's buddies are going to in turn shoot back all your buddies, well, I can use intelligence to get in front of that. This is what we do very effectively. As far as Chicago and places like this, and incidentally, I have to be blunt, Philadelphia, Chicago, Baltimore, in many ways look a lot like each other, not so much in terms of the crime numbers today, but just in terms of what the cities are like, the poverty levels in many cases, and all the things that lend themselves to issues that we're talking about. Chicago's an interesting place because there are people who are suggesting that because of all the things that have happened there that have been high profile, and I'm certainly not casting aspersions, I'm just trying to draw a conclusion, that some of the police officers may be dealing with something that has been dubbed the Ferguson effect. Now, whether that's a real phenomenon, I don't know. And whether there are academics that will say that the things that happen relative to the rise in crime across this nation, the uptick already started just before the things that happened in Ferguson. But it is hard to deny that when you look at, for example, the number of police pedestrian encounters that have happened in Chicago, that is some of that as a result of police officers being a little gun shy, for lack of a better word, and being concerned about what that looks like. The reality of it is the jury is still out, if you will. We really don't know. We know for us that is not the case. It's probably not the case in Chicago, but this is what some people are espousing could be the case. I will tell you that anecdotally, there are some police officers who will say that, you know, I'm afraid that I'm going to be the next social media hit while I'm trying to do my job, and now I'm scared to death that if I do something, and what you continually try to enforce is that you do your job and that you leave it to us to explain things that are explainable. I'll give you a real life example. I did a round table with a group of police officers just before I took over, and one cop says, well, are you going to back us up? And I said, absolutely. I said, if you come down to an issue that is a split-second decision that you can explain away, then that's fine. But if you do something that your own mother would be embarrassed to watch on TV, then no. I mean, let's be honest. If you're going to do something so idiotic that your mother's going to go, ugh, and they see that was my son doing that, I mean, come on now. Of course not. So it's so complex, and these are the issues we're trying to get our arms around. Gun violence in this country, I mean, particularly in big cities, it's just so pervasive. But again, compared to, I'll give you an example. And again, 1990 for us, we did 500 homicides. Last year we did 280, almost half. We're not happy with that, but it's a different number. It's a different look. So but think about it. To me, they were touting the fact that even here, we did our lowest number of homicides in 2013, 2014, which was 247 and 248. That's on an American city street that 248 people were killed. I can't accept that. And I call it progress at best, but I can't call it success because it doesn't make sense to me. Somebody had their hand up in the back.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very honored to hear a very soft-spoken commissioner with all the success stories that we have heard, in fact, being in Washington about your activities. Coming to the tough part of the question is, you as a native Philadelphian, do you think that you could be a good model for other states, in fact, that they need to find their own local commissioners to be hired, to be in that kind of position to solve the kind of issues that you solved here? Do you think that will And another tough question for you to being a man of color in uniform, how do you reconcile that one with a black man and police on the street? And the same with the community that the gentleman mentioned about the other faith groups. Thank you.
Two really good questions, and the last one, you're right, is even tougher, and I'm going to tackle them both. So, first question. There are times, I think, in any department, and our time happened 8 years ago when we brought Chuck Ramsey here from DC, when I think every department needs that outsider to just shake things up in a way that would just be far too difficult for an insider because of tradition, legacy, and a whole host of other things and expectations that are going to be placed upon the head of the guy who rose up through the ranks. Not that it's impossible, but it would be very difficult. And to be honest with you, I'm in the best position to say that because I would have been most likely to be the commissioner 8 years ago. And I can tell you, I am so glad it didn't happen for any number of reasons. Number one, I think Chuck Ramsey was able to come in and do some of the things that I just alluded to, which are make some changes that would have been very, very difficult to swallow for the rank and file coming from a guy or a girl who rose through the ranks. Here's the difference though. Chuck Ramsey himself, having never been a commissioner in his own homegrown department in Chicago, but was in DC and Philadelphia, will tell you that he will in turn tell any hiring authority that if you do not have to go outside, don't. If you have the talent inside and the department does not need that major paradigm shift, then stay inside because there's so many benefits. You know who the people are, you know where the talent are, you don't have the same learning curve and time that an outsider. But there's some benefits to being an outsider. As an outsider, you don't feel even this tug of what you get from folks in and out of the department. You're my friend, you owe me, you're this, you're that, and so you come from outside and really it's just about the person who hired you. And you're able to just do it, and you're able to do it objectively. I'll give you an example. We went through a program that Chuck Ramsey himself and another colleague started. It was called Police Executive Leadership Institute for deputy commissioners. Much like the military, his concern was you have your colleges that are designed for upper level management to continue their growth on the management level. We tend to stop in policing at mid-level management training. So he started this for people who wanted to become police chiefs like myself. And I'll never forget, one of the insiders said, she said, one of the challenges of being an insider, though, is that when discipline crosses your desk, and it could be a minor infraction, she was talking about minor stuff. You know when you read it that not only were you guilty of it, but everybody in the department knew you were guilty of it. And so now it's like, ooh, I did that. Outsider gets to rewrite history because they never did none of this stuff. And so they can do all of that. So to your second question about being a man of color, and I'll be honest with you, it does come with some challenges. And so in this era, when there's so much friction between police and community, where people believe, let's be honest, what they always want nationally, particularly, is this narrative that is something happened with a black suspect, we hope the cops are white, and then you get the national correspondent who is the black civil rights guy on one screen, and you get the expert who's a white former police person on the other screen, and on and on and on and on. For a person of color, you are undoubtedly walking a line that, and any police chief has this challenge. So I mean, and I've worked around for some of the most remarkable police chiefs who just happen to be Caucasian, and Chuck Ramsey's my friend and my mentor, and he's African American. So for me, it's where your heart is first. But when you are a person of color, there is a level of expectation. Some may be unreasonable. Some may be thinking that people believe you can change the world and that you can walk in. But here's the challenge, and I'm going to be honest. In this city, 80 to 90% of the offenders who shoot people are African American or Latino. And the same holds true for the number of victims that are shot. Along comes this controversial issue of stop and frisk, which some of you have heard of, and that the wholesale abuse of it, and that we want you to end it. Well, if you took a tool away from police officers that prevented them from detecting, deterring criminal activity, we would have a major problem in this country. However, as a person of color, people are saying, yeah, but you should know better. You should know what it feels like. And I have been stopped by the police before I was a police officer. It is a challenge that is not often talked about. And I think there are many police chiefs of color who are reluctant to broach that when they are in the company of others. But I think privately they know it's an issue. And so you have to strike that delicate balance between I know where I came from, I know what my mission is, and I know, and then again, it goes back to a comment I made before about, again, to your question, that's a perfect example of knowing that you got more than one audience when you're talking. And so I know, I got my rank and file that's listening to me, that is composed of both black, white, Asian, Latino. I know that I have significant communities of color who are most impacted by the issues that I talked about, who want to hear me, and even within those communities, I get different things. Will you please get these idiots and fools off my corner? And then I'll get this people over here be like, but your police officers are occupying the force. And really you feel like a top that's spinning around sometimes and almost feel like, what do you do? Because you realize that you're never going to strike a perfect balance, so you do what you think is right. But your question is so apropos because it is undeniable. It is a real sentiment. It's a real feeling. You can't let it consume you, but you can't deny that it exists. But thank you for raising that.
Sir, thank you. Magnus Lindström. I'm from Sweden, and thank you for a great speech. And I have a question in two parts. You started with saying that the demilitarization of the police force, but could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because if you follow U.S. media, you have a discussion that the U.S. police get a lot of surplus military material. There are snipers. They look very militarized. And that's one part. The second part is interagency. Can you please elaborate a little bit on your cooperation with the National Guard, or kind of the military side when they help you out, or how you work that as a police commissioner if the National Guard would be deployed, for a better word? Thank you.
So let me deal with the second part first. So with the National Guard for us, one of the things that, I don't know if we're fortunate or unfortunate, being the fourth largest department in the country, we don't have, knock on wood, a lot of opportunity or misfortune to even call out the National Guard. We're such a large department that we don't even in other, like we just had the Pope come, right? The end of last year. We did use the National Guard. But when we used the National Guard, they were dressed down for the most part, nothing below, other than what they had on below the waist fatigue-wise, for the most part. And they were literally on the outskirts of everything we did. And we did that for the reason that you're alluding to, because we did not want this look, and this is nothing against the National Guard or the military, but we did not want pilgrims to come here for a spiritual event and feel like they were in this militarized zone, which would create an issue. Here is the reality though. We had to use them because of the number of people, close to 1 million people converging on a small area in Center City. And we all know, and you know it better than me, the world has changed. And so when the Pope came here in 1979, that was a different visit than it is now. And so what we were not going to have, despite any perceptions, and we got beat up a little bit about closing down too much of the city. We're not going to have the Pope or anybody else get hurt while we're on an international stage. Striking that balance is difficult. Now, in terms of trying to demilitarize police departments, you can never do it wholesale anyway, because we get far too many incidents that we dub active shooters, whether it's driven by terrorism or whatever it is. We know these are a reality of our world today, and they've gone on across the country, so we have to have police departments that are prepared to respond. I will tell you, so I will answer this question from the standpoint of what we do in Philly PD. We have some of that stuff. You will not see it most of the time. unless, of course, like we have the Bear and these gigantic, armored vehicles, but unless we use them to transport, if necessary, personnel to incidents where an active shooter or something were going on, to keep our people safe, not to make the people that we're sworn to protect feel like they're being basically victimized by us. Yeah, always hesitate to say never, but we don't use tear gas. We tend to take a very low-key, I don't want to say passive because it's not in a cop's DNA to really say that, but a very low-key approach to the plethora of demonstrations. And we've had some where we've had 3,000 or 4,000 people take over Center City. But what we tend to do is try to work with these groups and show them that we, one, have an obligation to protect your rights. I spoke about, the Holocaust and the fact that police haven't always been on the right side. Well, that was certainly the same thing down in Alabama and plenty of other places where dogs were sicked and hoses were sicked on our own people in this nation. And so we protect the rights of the people who actually are out there protesting. But we do have to have some of that equipment, but we know, for example, the Democratic National Convention is coming in July. We know that there will be protests. We are thankful that it's not the RNC and that shame on Cleveland. I'm sorry, I'm glad it's not us. But we still know what's going to happen. And so what we're going to do is take the same approach, and this is the advantage of being in a big city, having a large department, and having had protests. You're already prepared for a lot of it. You know what to deal with. So although we may have folks who are more than ready to respond should something get completely out of hand, which we do not anticipate, I'm talking about riots. You will never see those people. The press won't see them. The protesters won't see them. So it'll look like, we used to say all the time, and it's not, we didn't dub the phrase, but if you come looking like you're ready for a fight, you're gonna get a fight, right? So if you come looking like you got turtle gear on and you're standing there because they're protests, what do you think they're gonna do? They're gonna respond in kind. Doesn't mean that you absolutely will be protected from that, but what I'm trying to say is it's gotta be a balance. And so we gotta have the equipment, but we don't use a bunch of launchers and all this stuff. We obviously, when you get something as large as a Democratic convention, the government's gonna help you out. And we pretty much get the latitude on what we're gonna buy. We are not buying grenade launchers. We're not doing it just to have it in our arsenal, because if you got it, first of all, in this day and age, people are going to crucify you for why did you get it in the first place? Why did you need it? So we just try to take a different response and pray that we get it right, to be honest with you.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay, that's me. I'm David Savard. I'm from the International Organization for Migration. And this ties together some of the words that are up here, sovereignty and institutions, with life on the street, as you talked about. So how do we expect people to respect the law, or to put it another way, to willingly subject themselves to state sovereignty, when every, not most, but every state, every state, political, civil institution is compromised? Sports, religion, politics, police, federal, state, and local governments, banking, business. Every sector of our society is corrupt or illegitimate. And yet we expect civilians to toe the line, and even small steps out of the line are punished quite aggressively by the authorities.
Good question. And so that's one of the things that I think goes even both to Sir Robert Peel's positioning. He's actually got 9 principles of policing, but it goes to what we believe, what most of us believe, is that you have to gain the trust of the people that you're sworn to protect and serve. Otherwise, they will never allow you to do what you're sworn to do. The power and authority bestowed upon police departments is given ultimately by the people. And if the people who you are protecting believe that you are not there for them, they have every right to feel the way you said. They have every right to feel that way. And so what I submit to you is that there are neighborhoods who feel the way they do because that's legitimate. Not because of some perception, not because they're just out there trying to pontificate and really just bounce around all this crazy rhetoric, because it's real. So what you have to work very hard at is gain the trust of the people who gave you that power and authority. And if you can't do that, then you will always have this friction. You will always have this chasm. And you will never be able to drive down crime the way it should be and have the quality of life for people that they deserve, irrespective of neighborhood. None of that will happen for you. I don't care whether you're talking about Philadelphia, whether you're talking about Chicago, New York. First of all, you got a couple things. One, nobody cares about what your crime numbers look like, even if they're good, if I don't feel safe. That's number one. If I don't feel like I can come out my house and I can walk down the street personally without being accosted, robbed, whatever, I don't care what your crime numbers are. But the same thing, going to your question, is if I feel like the people who wear a uniform are the very entity that causes me, whether it be as a person of color or not, the most angst as I walk the streets, then I really don't care about your crime numbers, because you are the ones who are putting all this on me, and you're subjugating me, you're doing all these other things, all in the name of, or all in the case of basically the ends justify the means, and they don't. And that is the challenge, and I'm glad you raised that we in law enforcement will have to deal with. And I don't profess that we will have the silver bullet, that is a panacea that exists where we can just magically flip a button and people across this nation in particular feel that law enforcement now understands how they have to do everything that they do constitutionally. They have to build trust. And I submit to you that the onus is on us to extend the olive branches the most, to say that we have to work very hard. Now, it has to be a two-way street, but you have to gain the trust of the people who gave you the right to enforce the laws in your particular jurisdiction before you will ever get anything done. It's just the bottom line.